Hey everybody, Crow here, back to take a look at the 5 games included in this Evercade cartridge number 22, the Bitmap Brothers Collection 1. The Bitmap Brothers were founded in 1987 and were mostly successful with their games released on the Amiga and the Atari ST, though many of those games would receive ports to other platforms. They were also known for their games with a high degree of difficulty due to the mentality that they didn't believe people would want to play easy games. After 2002, they primarily focused on licensing their old games to other companies, and in 2019, their entire back catalog was acquired by Rebellion Developments. So, we'll take a look at the 5 games in this collection. I'll explain whether or not I liked, disliked, or was just indifferent towards each one, and afterwards I'll rank them from my least favorite to my most favorite. So let's get started. Speedball was originally released in 1988 for the Amiga and Atari ST and was later ported to MS-DOS, the Commodore 64, and this version, which was for the Sega Master System, that only saw a European release. Oddly enough, this game was published twice in Europe, first by Imageworks and later by Virgin Interactive. Each version was the same game, but had significantly different box art. There was also a port for the NES, but that went under the title Clash Ball. So Speedball is a violent, futuristic sport that plays something like handball. The game starts when a metal ball is launched in a random direction from a cannon in the middle of the arena. After that, all you need to worry about is getting the ball into the opponent's goal. But it's also advantageous to rough up the other team, as that'll reduce their stamina. There are no penalties, and the game only stops if a goal is scored and the players wait for the ball to be relaunched again. The arena has a few obstacles to trip you up, including the warp tunnel in the center of each side of the wall and the bounce domes that don't affect the players but will change the path of the ball if hit. Finally, tokens and letters will appear randomly on the floor. The tokens can be used after a game to change the certain elements in the next match, such as increasing your stamina levels, reducing the opponent's intelligence, or even bribing the ref into letting you start the game with a point already on the board. The letters you collect during the game will cause some sort of immediate temporary effect depending on the letter. For example, Fs will freeze the opponents, a W will turn the ball into a weapon, and a G will automatically give you possession of the ball. Everything in the game can be controlled with the D-pad and one button, more than likely due to the game's roots on the Amiga and Atari ST. That one button will allow you to throw the ball higher, jump, and tackle. When I heard that Speedball is coming to the Evercade, I was looking forward to it because this was a game that I remember playing and enjoying quite a bit when I was a kid. Now, the version I played back then was the Commodore 64 version, but this Master System port should be at least as good, right? Right? Unfortunately, no. This port of the game is an utter disaster. Right from the beginning, you'll see that there are only 2 game modes, a 1-player knockout tournament and a 2-player game. The knockout tournament is just playing against other teams consecutively until you lose. If you want to be generous, you could say that the 3rd option is another mode, but that's just watching the computer play against itself. All of the league options are missing from this port, and I presume that's because the Master System had no way to save a game, so they removed it completely. The gameplay itself is what really kills this port though. It runs considerably slower than the other versions, and the frame rate is absolutely terrible. The ball is incredibly hard to follow at times, and it's easy to lose track of. It's also hard to keep track of who has the ball and even what player you're controlling, and if none of your players happen to be on the screen, you don't know if you're in control of someone above or below the screen. There's also a severe problem with collision detection here. Sometimes I'll run directly over an item, but somehow not pick it up. Also, the ball sometimes appears to go right through my goalie. 2 players can get locked together for a while, punching each other for the ball. My own players even got stuck to each other, making them both immobile. On top of all that, I think the computer cheats. Many times I'll punch him and he'll roll around on the ground, but still have the ball. A couple times he stole the ball from me, knocking me to the ground, and then continually punched me so my guy practically rolled uncontrollably down the whole arena. The sound effects aren't that great either, especially when a goal is scored. There's just a quick chime and that's it. No other sound effects, no sirens going off, no crowds cheering. If I don't see the ball go in the goal, then I get confused as to what's going on, especially when it looks like my goalie blocked the ball. I could go on and on and on with all the issues I had with this game. I played it for well over an hour, and I just continually got more and more frustrated. I really didn't like this one, and that's primarily because this is the worst version of the game they could have possibly put on an Evercade cartridge. I know they've not done any Amiga or Commodore 64 games yet, but they really should have included one of those versions of the game instead. Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe is the sequel to Speedball, and it was released in 1990 for multiple platforms, including the Atari ST, Amiga, Amiga CD32, PC, Commodore 64, Sega Master System, and the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive, which is the version that's included here on the Evercade. This sequel significantly builds upon the original Speedball by increasing the number of players on the playfield, offering a bigger arena, and offering more ways to score points than just scoring a goal. This time around, we get a story. Something about Speedball failing due to violence and corruption, and so a new league called Speedball 2 is created, and you're in control of the team Brutal Deluxe, the worst team in the league, and it's up to you to turn them into champions. In between games, you can use the points you earn to build up the stats of each of your players. You can do this by either meticulously going through every player and upgrading each stat individually, or just upgrade the whole team at once with the funds you have available. The matches themselves are pretty much the same as the original game, but with some enhancements. Since the arena is bigger, the screen will now scroll left and right as well as up and down. The players are a bit bigger and more detailed. Also, the game is faster and animated far better. Well, at least compared to the Sega Master System version of Speedball that's also included in this collection. The warp tunnels and bounce domes from the first Speedball return, but there are more wall elements that have been added, such as the stars that'll earn you points if hit, a loop-de-loop that'll multiply the points you earn, and a spot that'll electrify the ball, knocking out your opponents if they touch it. I'd never played this one before, and during the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game, I was enjoying it. It was so much better than the Master System Speedball that I had just been playing the day before. I liked the instant replays and the player celebrations after a goal, but as I continued to play, I started to get more and more frustrated. Actually to the point to where I threw the controller down in the middle of a match and refused to continue playing. At first, I was having a hard time figuring out where I even was on the playfield. Then I noticed the instruction manual mentioning something about white markers to help you aim. Oh yeah, if you kind of squint, you could kind of see them blinking. Depending on what side of the playfield you're on, they'll either be at the top of the screen or at the bottom. But the thing that I really got frustrated at was that I found the controls to be entirely too twitchy, to the point to where my players won't do what I want them to do. It's actually the twitchy controls combined with the speed of the game and the fact that when one of my players doesn't have the ball, the game will switch control of the player I have without me realizing it. Or if none of my players are on the screen, then I have no idea where the player I'm controlling is. There were plenty of situations where I was chasing down an opponent and trying to tackle him, only for the game to switch my control to the goalie, and then all of a sudden my goalie just jumps out of the goal, letting the other team score easily. This game still uses one button for everything, so many times when the game switches control of a player, the player I get switched to performs the action I meant for another guy, or maybe even a different action, and that always royally screws things up. Seeing the bigger and more detailed players on screen is great, but I feel that the camera is zoomed in on the arena too close because it limits your view of what's around you. Also, when a player with the ball runs up or down the playfield, they get pretty close to the edge of the screen before it starts scrolling. If I have the ball, then I don't know who's immediately in front of me. If I need to pass the ball, I have to do it blindly, not knowing if there's another player there or not. And if the other team has the ball, then I don't know if any of my players are nearby to stop them. On top of that, the twitchy controls have me often throwing the ball in a completely different direction than I intended. I've even had my own goalie just turn around and throw the ball just right in my own goal. I know there are many people out there that think this is one of the greatest games of all time, but I just find it very difficult to enjoy. I can't enjoy a game where it feels like too many things are just out of my control. Speedball 2100, I believe, is kind of a remake of Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe, and it was released in the year 2000, and is only for the PlayStation. The game is practically the same as Speedball 2, but with polygons instead of sprites, and you can now edit your team, so you don't have to be the team Brutal Deluxe if you don't want to, and you can just change it to whatever you want. And when I say it's practically the same as Speedball 2, I mean it. The same management system is here, as well as the same arena elements and the same way to score points. The only other major difference is that the game plays a little bit slower, and also the player actions are finally mapped to different buttons. That's right, throwing the ball, tackling, and jumping are all separate buttons. The fantastic thing about that is that if you have the ball, you can finally shove other people out of your way. Or, if you want to jump, you know that you're going to jump and not slide on the ground instead. The goal guides from Speedball 2 are now gone, but it's not really necessary here as the arena has areas marked differently, so it's pretty easy to always know where your players are in relation to the goal. I still don't have a choice as to what player I'm controlling on defense, but since the actions are all mapped to different buttons, if the control switches to another player just when I hit a button, the action performed will still at least be the same one I intended. I also do still have a bit of a control issue, like sometimes I have a hard time getting the player to pick up a dead ball, but because the game is a little bit slower, I don't nearly have as many issues as I did with the previous game. The only thing I had trouble with consistently is throwing the ball high instead of low, since those two actions are still mapped to the same button. I don't think I need to talk about this one as long as the other two Speedball games, because I actually don't have as many issues with this one. I actually liked this one, and that surprised me because I thought this was going to be the one I didn't like. It's certainly not perfect, but given the choice of playing any of the Speedball games in this collection, this'll be the one I want to play 100% of the time. The Chaos Engine is a top-down shooter that was released in 1993, originally for the Amiga, and later ported to many platforms, including MS-DOS, the Atari ST, the Amiga CD32, the Sega Mega Drive/Genesis, and the Super Nintendo, which is the version included in this collection. For whatever reason, when the game came to North America, the name was changed to Soldiers of Fortune. The game's story is set in the late 19th century, where an inventor by the name of Baron Fortesque creates a machine called the Chaos Engine, which has the ability to alter time and space. Of course, the machine grows sentient and assimilates the Baron and starts wreaking havoc upon the world. You're in control of a mercenary on a mission to find and destroy the Chaos Engine, thus returning the world back to normal, while also potentially profiting along the way. At its core, the game just appears to be a basic top-down run-and-gun shooter, but there are a few things that actually makes this one stand out. Firstly, you can't take on this mission alone. You have to have a second player join you. If you have no one else to play with, well, fortunately, the CPU can control the second mercenary. This is how I played the game, and I honestly have no complaints about how the CPU performed as my partner. In fact, it may have been just a little bit advantageous, since the CPU would often find and destroy enemies before I even knew they were on the screen. Secondly, there are 6 mercenaries to choose from, each with different weapons and abilities. If the CPU is controlling the second mercenary, they will never use their abilities. However, you'll be able to swap your abilities with theirs, giving you more abilities to use during the game. Every 2 levels, you'll be able to upgrade your stats, weaponry, and abilities with the money you've earned. If the CPU is controlling the mercenary, an additional stat called Wisdom is also upgradable. This is basically how intelligent the AI reacts during gameplay, and I thought that was a pretty interesting feature to include. Every level itself is like a maze, with the goal to destroy the nodes to open the exit to the next level. As you navigate the level, various creatures will attack you, sometimes emerging from a hole or just appearing out of thin air. Creatures don't respawn after you destroy them, but certain events may cause more creatures to appear. The game loves to taunt you with an item, and then when you go to grab it, you'll immediately be surrounded. The levels themselves will also open and close paths based on what you do. This will sometimes free a confined monster, open a path to the exit, or reveal a secret area. And the game is just loaded with secrets. Seemingly ordinary level objects can sometimes be destroyed, triggering a secret path to open. Sometimes after the exit's been opened, I'll be running around and I'll still see items that I can't access on the ground, and I'll think, what did I miss to be able to access that loot? The game controls pretty well once you get the hang of it, and it would have been nice if this was set up like a twin-stick shooter, but I understand that wouldn't have worked well for the platforms this game was originally designed for. The game lets you rotate your character using the shoulder buttons while you're firing to help you with your aim, but I found it to be unnecessary. You can't move while you're firing your gun, so it's just easy to point in the direction you want to shoot while you're firing. Overall, I thought this game was incredibly fun. I enjoyed trying out the different characters, and I really liked the surprises the game would throw at you from time to time. Other than kind of wishing I could play this like a twin-stick shooter, there's nothing negative I really have to say about this game.
Special 4, 3.
The final game in the collection is the shoot-'em-up Xenon 2 Megablast. And just like most of the games in this collection, it was first released on the Amiga and Atari ST in 1989 and was later ported to a plethora of other platforms. The version in this collection is the Sega Mega Drive version that was released in 1992, and it was only released in Europe. The Xenites, the antagonists of the original game, are apparently so upset at losing the last conflict that they've planted 4 bombs throughout history. When they go off, it'll be the end of the universe. It's up to you to blast through the 4 levels and defeat the bosses at the end of each. So this is your pretty typical vertically scrolling shoot 'em up with a few things that deviate it from the norm. The biggest one to me is the fact that if you hold down while at the bottom of the screen, you'll actually start moving backwards. This is something you'll have to do from time to time, like if you take the wrong path and wind up at a dead end, or if you need to back up to hit a weak spot on a boss. I find that I accidentally go down on the screen too much a few times, and this will cause the screen to back up, and while it's a bit jarring, it's really not that big of a deal. This is also one of those shoot 'em ups where one hit doesn't kill you, and instead you'll have a health bar. Defeating enemies will sometimes leave an orb that can contain a variety of weapons to power you up, or a health refill, or a speed boost. And every so often you'll be transported to a shop where you can sell your weapons if you want to, and also buy new weapons and power-ups. Oddly enough, there's no Mega Bomb ability. Usually shoot 'em ups give you a screen-clearing weapon that you can use a limited amount of times. Well, nothing like that is available here. Instead, sometimes a Z capsule will sometimes pop out of an enemy, and that'll clear the screen. But that'll just happen instantly when you touch it. The ship can seemingly take a lot of punishment before being destroyed, and when you are destroyed, you'll often be able to continue not far from where you lost your ship. Not only that, but you retain most of the weapons you had, and you do not power down. The only thing I know of you'll lose for sure is auto fire if that was a power-up you had. Oddly enough, if you lose all your lives and have to use a continue, you'll still continue not far from where you died and still keep most of your weaponry. Also, if you're fighting a level boss, you'll continue right there at the boss and it'll still have the damage you've previously inflicted. The game is very generous in that regard. But that's where my generosity ends, because I really don't have anything else good to say about this game. The first thing that got me was the choppy and slow pace the game runs at. That's something I actually got used to though. If you hold the fire button down, your ship will auto-fire, but really slowly. You're way better off just constantly tapping the fire button. Even if you purchase the auto-fire power-up, you'll still be able to fire faster yourself, making that power-up completely pointless if you can handle the repeated button pushing. My preferred method, however, is to use a controller with auto-fire. But I really feel there's a problem with collision detection as well, because sometimes that stream of bullets will not destroy a ship unless it's hit just right. Hell, I swear I've seen my bullets go through the enemy sometimes. The game also loves to constrict you in corridors, and as I previously alluded, if you take the wrong corridor, you'll slowly have to back out of it, and that's not really fun. The game moves slow enough already as it is, and now you've got to go backwards? Fortunately, bumping into the walls doesn't damage your ship, but if you're stuck in a small confined space, sometimes you'll not be able to avoid the enemy ships coming at you from any direction. And when you do take damage, there's no indication that you've been hit other than the ship's health meter going down. But you're usually not looking at that. There's no sound effect or visual on the ship to show that you've been hit. So sometimes you think you've avoided a bunch of gunfire, when in reality you were hit several times and took a ton of damage. You'll later look at the health meter and wonder, where did my ship take all that damage? The game also only has one tune that plays constantly, and it's actually not bad, but it does feel odd to hear the same tune on the game's menu, during every level, and during the game's credits. And it actually makes me wonder if that's why the option to have the music play during the gameplay is defaulted to being off. But then you've just got the game's sparse sound effects and slow gameplay, and I swear I nearly fell asleep trying to play the game that way. Also, I don't understand the point of a weapon in the shop you can buy that makes you super powered up, but only for the next 10 seconds of gameplay. I mean, what's the point of that? Anyway, I think I've gone on long enough about this game. It should be obvious by now that I didn't like this one. And that's all 5 games in the Bitmap Brothers Collection 1. My least favorite of the lot has got to be Xenon 2 Megablast. I know there are people out there that like this one, and maybe the Amiga version is better, but I simply did not like this Genesis/Mega Drive version at all. In spot number 4 is Speedball. Very disappointed that this is the Master System version of the game, which not only doesn't play as good as the other versions, but is also missing features that almost every other version has. Right in the middle at number 3 is Speedball 2. It's another game in this collection I didn't like, although I know there are people out there that really do like this game, but I don't like it mostly due to the frustration of not knowing what's going on immediately off screen. At number 2 is the Speedball game in the collection I actually do like, Speedball 2100, a PlayStation version of Speedball 2 that was quite a bit easier to play due to the slower speed and better field awareness and more available buttons being used. And finally, easily the best game of the cartridge for me, the Chaos Engine, the run and gun shooter for 2 players that also incorporates a bit of an RPG element. And that wraps it up for the Bitmap Brothers Collection 1. The next Evercade video will be on the very first arcade collection, Technos Arcade 1. See you next time.